This week, we're happy to welcome Angus Haywood. Angus is a photographer, lives in the south of England. I met Angus last year when I went to see the Michael Kenna exhibit in Boston. Angus, it's very nice to see you again.
Hello, Kirk. Nice to talk to you again. Thank you very much for having me. And hello, Jeff in Seattle.
Hello. Thanks for coming on.
Angus is here to talk to us about film, about shooting film, about building a darkroom and making prints in the darkroom. And in some emails recently, you were telling me about how you've just built your darkroom and how enjoyable it is to be in the darkroom. And this is something I've heard from a lot of people who work with film, that they find the process in the darkroom to be more interesting than the actual photographic process. But first, tell us about building your darkroom. How much work is it? How complicated is it?
It's a lot of prior preparation, research, and so on. I did actually have some tutoring in the darkroom a few years ago, but to a limited amount because I knew it would be hard to get access to a darkroom where I lived. Plus, I was working abroad as well. And over this last year, as you know, I was working in a gallery, Boston Gallery down on Chichester Harbour, and I was surrounded by Michael Kenna's work, and gradually it seeped through like osmosis into me, and I became more and more aware that I could go from digital print to silver gelatin print somehow, but I didn't have his experience of 45 years, 46 years, or other Charlie Waite's 50 years of experience and others. I was going to have to try and do it somehow, and maybe take some more tutoring or dive in myself and just try and work it out as I went along. And that's how it worked. Because of COVID and all sorts of things, it's ended up me self-teaching myself and making my own mistakes in the gallery and enjoying that aspect quietly away from everyone else and finding my groove. And after a couple of months, I've popped out sort of happy with the quality and the direction I'm going finally. But I did come from printing digitally with lovely carbon inks, Pixography Pro. But it would be fair to say there is a difference between, as you know, between silver gelatin and Pixography Pro or any digital prints, especially if you're in a gallery surrounded by them all day. And there is that sense that digital is tattooed on the paper, as good as it is, and emulsion does have that little depth to it. So I wanted to compare the two, and I plunged in with going ahead with a darkroom, rigging it up as best as I could. So I have to take water down there, for instance, and I power electricity in various ways across a lane or by solar power or a little suitcase generator. But I've got it going, and I've actually framed prints. So it's been a lot of work and a lot of research.
So where is this darkroom located?
So in my cottage here in West Sussex, across the lane there's a paddock. And back in the winter I started building a foundation for it. Had a feel for the size. And it's about 5 meters by 4. And it's a black angular shed, which is insulated with foil, aluminium foil material. And I got electricity cables running to it, or as I said, solar power now to a limited way. So everything's jury-rigged, and it will have another form in the future with its dry and wet side more slick. But I wanted to take advantage of this COVID period to just get something up and running, and then over the years I will improve it and think about it more.
Most people, when they start out, they do it in a closet or in a spare room. You actually went and built a shed to use as a darkroom.
Yes, well, I'd looked online for other proper darkrooms up and running in private homes, clubs, that sort of thing. I couldn't find any online in a wide internet, and I was getting a bit frustrated. I thought, once I did my research over weeks and weeks, a few months, I thought it is possible, and I've always got a shed at the end. I've designed it to be portable as well in a strange way. So theoretically, it could be craned and the base could be removed. It's one of these eco bases. So I was wanting to. I had a sense of just diving in to try it and not spending an enormous amount. So it's not like an office that you'd work in. It's a minimalist place with everything temporary at the moment. On camping tables, I've even used a Black & Decker workbench, but everything is blacked out. It's all black inside, cloth everywhere. I'm very happy, and it all works surprisingly. Yeah.
A darkroom isn't that complicated. You need the, what do you call them, basins for the chemicals. You need the enlarger. Right. You need a place to hang the prints. My first experience with photography was when I was in high school. You had to do a shop class in high school, and this could be wood shop or metal shop or auto shop, where all the jocks would go and take the car apart and put it back together. And they had a photography shop, and I found it really interesting. But over the years when I was shooting film, and I would rent darkroom space in New York City because it was very common. Darkrooms are really somewhat minimalist to start with, aren't they? There's not a lot of gear in a darkroom.
Correct. So you're down to an enlarger. I have a very manual enlarger. And, I have about 4 trays running, and then I have a big tub for like a pre-wash, you might say, before I bring them inside for further washing into the cottage. And then I have some filing on next to the enlarger, and I've got lots of detritus and dodging tools and burning everything. So, and it's accumulated a little bit, and of course I've got a little music system in there as well.
Of course,
which you do need, if you're listening to late at night, and I have been at 1 or 2 in the morning, happily not seen the sun go down or anything, with I don't know, Eric Satie piano on, and in my own little world, in my cocoon of red light.
That's right. So if people have never been in a darkroom, you use red light because that doesn't expose the paper. So after a while, you get this weird feeling like you're in a submarine.
Yes, yeah. So, and hours really will go by. It's quite surprising. But you are working hard, concentrating, and feeling productive, actually. And you have to go through this process. And keeping print logs I do as well for every print as well, so that I feel as though I'm making some progress in the right direction.
So you record your settings and the timings and how long you develop, etc.
Yes, it's still part of the simplicity of the process, but I knew quite early on that if I was inexperienced as a printer, I'd have to record everything, and then there's so many variables, I would limit the variables that I would start changing. So everything was recorded, timed, and then make one small adjustment, say a grade change, and then enjoy the effect or discard it. And you might go up to 8 prints for one negative, but then that I'm happy with that. It's done, and then everything speeds up if I need to replicate again. And that will set me up for years to come, especially as I get more experience. I could come back to something in 5 years, have a look at my print log. I think for me that was the only way to do it. Otherwise, you are going to inbuild some frustration with your whole process unless you know because of what you've done before. And in my case, I can't always remember what I've done in the earlier half of the day if I'm flipping between negatives, let alone the day before. So, and I find it works really well. So it's a sort of a discipline to it.
So you said you've worked in digital before.
Yes.
Here you're shooting film and you're printing film. How long have you been shooting film? We must mention you shoot Hasselblad, so these are not your average standard cameras that everyone uses.
No.
Were you using digital Hasselblads before and moved to film Hasselblads?
I never could afford a digital Hasselblad, and it was quite something to afford the Hasselblad kit. So I actually started off, I think it was in the 80s. My father gave me a Russian Zenit camera, and which I broke soon after. And then I was quite soon onto a Mamiya C220. For those who might not remember those, it's a 6x6, so I was straight into film, medium format. I was looking for higher quality from 35mm quite early on, and I liked the square format compositionally. And then I stayed with that for years and years and years. I was always angling for a Bronica or something. And it wasn't until I was, in my previous life, I was an airline pilot, and I could actually begin to think about affording a Hasselblad, a simple one. I just wanted a 500 series, but I was buying the lens, the Zeiss lens range, and I knew, and I was a great admirer of Faye Godwin and later Michael Kenner and others. Michael Kenner quite late on, actually, and there was something about those Zeiss lenses. So even though I might have been aspiring for a Bronica, I was already have my eyes on the Hasselblad as a kind of a Rolls Royce. And when I was looking, just not that long ago, probably 2014, maybe a bit before, it was reasonably priced to buy a kit and a few lenses. I believe they've all gone up again now. So and that's what I'm happy to stay with at the moment, but everyone must expect some change at some point. I might go on to colour. I might like a digital back. I have many problems with light leaks. I've just about solved them now. But when you're in the field, there's all sorts of complications when you're working totally manually. And sometimes I am envious of people with digital backs.
So color is a totally different process in the darkroom.
Yes.
Are you developing your own film as well, or are you just printing the negatives?
Yeah, so I am processing my own films, and I'm just back from Germany. Only yesterday I finished the last of 21 rolls, so that took me quite a few days in the gaps. And that is another process at the moment I quite enjoy, but I can see already, in a way, it's something you want to farm off to others, just for the time and mess sometimes, or inconvenience, because it is a long process to do. And it's not, in a way, it's not creative for me at the moment. But I still enjoy it. There is something about it. Only I get to see them coming out of the tank wet and ready to hang up in the filing cabinet. And already I'm editing in my mind and looking forward to printing them. And even better when I see them dry the next morning or so. So yes, I'm doing everything at the moment, and I do actually dry mount the photographs sometimes at the picture framers, because he taught me on his big Demco press. So I do quite a lot, from getting up in the morning at the right time right through to the end to dry mounting them. The only thing I'm not doing is the glass and the framing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, you can't do everything.
You can't do everything.
But you are actually, you're involved in almost every step of the process, and that gives you a better feel of what you're doing. And when we talked to Michael Kenner recently, he said he just sends all his film out to different labs around the world. He doesn't care about developing it. And I know that developing is more a question of measuring chemicals, getting the timing right. It's precise. It's not creative. Unlike printing, where you do have this creativity of, you're looking at a negative. How do you want to do it? Do you want to dodge and burn? Do you want to overexpose, underexpose? You have a lot of latitude in the printing process.
Yes, you do. Michael, though, having spoken to him, he's doing about 500 to 1,000 rolls, isn't he, per year? Not during 2020, of course, but he just cannot spend half his life processing anymore. I know he would have done it much in the past, and I'm sure there are many other photographers like that. At the moment, with the number of rolls I'm doing, I can just about do it, but it is something I would farm out to others in the future, just to gain a bit of time and on other things, so around the house as well.
Most people, when they talk about shooting film, they do it because the inherent slowness of the process, the intentionality. Is that what interests you in film?
Yes, I knew it was there, and now I'm actually doing it. I'm enjoying that even more than I thought, the craftsmanship of from start to finish, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, even taking the pictures, it's a different process. You don't just point and shoot.
No. It's a slow, considerate process. Even getting up in the morning, having your breakfast, you're beginning to consider that process before you even get out of the car later on in 1 or 2 hours or something, or the hike up to the hill. Even the hike up the hill, I'm beginning to get into it and think about it. For might be a compressed time of 15 minutes actually taking the photograph. Sometimes it might be 2 hours up there, or even longer, discovering a little area. In Germany, that was the first time I'd really gone round that country in detail. It's normally been a country I've transited across. And I'd had planned a number of locations. So they've been in my head since about April or May. I had originally had 238 locations. Obviously, it can't you can't
Wow.
be hopping around the country doing it any service if you've got 230. So I split it in half in a sort of southerly and westerly Germany. And even then I started, once I was in the country, I started joining the dots in a different way and might be losing one here because you have to think of what time of day you're arriving. And also some skies are blue. And that's no good to a black and white photographer always. Sometimes you need to time it when there is some more interest in the sky. But anyway, all worked out. I'm very happy with the 21 rolls so far. And I'm just glad I finished it last night.
So what is the process? You're using a light meter.
Yes.
You're metering very carefully. Are you using filters? Since you're shooting in black and white, are you using red filters to bring out the sky, or green filters, or whatever?
Yes. Very often it'll be your orange and your red, and a standard would be the yellow. And again, it's just around contrast. Sometimes I might want to slow the shutter down a bit, so you've got a red and a neutral density of 10 stops or 6 stops. And but generally, it's an artistic decision. I see a sky and, say, a bottom third of land with trees or a chapel or something. I'm thinking mostly about the sky. I already know red will bring out what I perceive as the interest that others might see as well in the sky. And only a red filter can do it for me at the moment. And other times I might do one in orange and one in red and see what we have. And then there are longer exposures in between those as well, which might be 20 seconds, 2 minutes, 15 minutes. You don't know what you're going to get. I think that's quite commonly said. But the filters are very much part of the creative thinking now. And even, surprisingly, when I'm driving the car, walking, my head is thinking in square, and it has done since the 80s. Even when I was flying for a living, looking out the window, and you're up amongst the clouds, I was still thinking in square, looking at cirrus clouds, icy, wispy white horses, and I'm still thinking of a red filter or an orange filter, and I haven't stopped doing that since the 80s. And so you never switch off, it's just perpetual.
What is the attraction of the square format?
Yes.
To bring up Michael Kenna again, he mentioned to me something about the fact that you don't have any preconceived ideas that are imposed by a shape, that the square format is more free. So
yes.
you don't have the landscape or the portrait mode that's going to affect the way you look at something. Is that what you like about it?
Very true indeed. And of course, you've still got the option once you compose to make it into a portrait or landscape format once you crop it down. But yes, I absolutely love looking through that square ground glass and composing diagonally. And sometimes you get the oddest compositions, but they do work in your mind. May not come out eventually like that. But you're not just thinking about the rule of 2/3. You could be rule of 2/3 and a diagonal element, and it just seems to work with square. I always found 35mm rather restricting, not just because of the quality, but just because of that format. And that's why I do have a 6x7 camera, but I originally got it to crop it down to 6x6. It's a Mamiya 7 II. And but again, even that's a slight deviation from square, my favorite. And I think also because I was admirers of square format photographers like Faye Godwin and others when I started getting interested in photography, particularly in the 80s. And then, of course, Michael Kenner, who I got to see in books and magazines. And, you know, it's just reinforced my love for thinking in square format.
Well, that's the thing, though. There's something about black and white photos in the square format that there seems to be a lineage of it. And you don't see that as much in color. You don't see a lot of square photos in color. I think it's more that black and white photography with the sort of, what would you call it, like a Rolleiflex type camera that was shooting square kind of developed in a different way than the 35mm black and white with different types of subjects. Is that a fair thing to say?
Yes, actually, I know it works for landscape, but I can't say for sure. Does it work for documentary or reportage or something? That's quite interesting. I think it's widely used in portraiture, isn't it? Where I was watching a program, Norman Parkinson and others, and Hasselblad's featured heavily. You know, my genre is landscape. I'm always thinking about landscape. I know it works. I can't say I've thought enough about whether it works for those other genres to the pitch it does for landscape in its history. And I do want to be part of the continuation of using square, and I'm sure other people enjoy it as much as me. I mean, I enjoy other people's landscape.
Well, square became fashionable with Instagram, so lots of people use square, even though they're not intending to do it. It's just what happens. Either they're taking a picture with the Instagram app, or they upload a photo and they don't realize that you can crop a photo, that you can uncrop the square and get your photo in a different aspect ratio.
Wait a minute, there was square before Instagram?
Well, it's true that Instagram did bring square into the common concept of photography.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm quite new to Instagram. It was actually Charlie Waite. He came into the gallery, and he was incredibly enthusiastic about discovering Instagram and uploaded a lot of his photos. And I began to think about it more. And I do like the simplicity. I'm already doing square, obviously. And I like it a lot out of everything now. I think it's my favorite out of the social medias. And I hope they don't have any other shapes.
Well, but you can. It automatically crops to square if you're, let's say, if you upload a 3:2, but you can tap a thing or click a thing to get it to the right aspect ratio. Which, as you've seen the photos that I shoot, I'm a 3:2 aspect ratio obsessive. And if I had a square camera, I probably wouldn't be. But one thing that I like about the 3:2 aspect ratio is it's closer to what we see in reality. We don't see in square. We see in, say, anywhere from a 3:2 to a 16:9, right? So square is an intention that's changing the field of vision almost radically, in fact.
Yes. This is, it'd be interesting to hear from a psychologist how the brain is wired optically and how it thinks about square. But I do know artistically it does work, doesn't it? It works in paintings. It definitely works in a black and white landscape. But I'd have to give it some more thought, actually. But it's a natural thing to me now to, when I'm looking through that viewfinder, my eye is dancing around diagonally and horizontally and vertically. It's not a simple thing to compose, and you're making minute adjustments. And it is that challenge within the square that once it's got to balance with textures, shadows, lines, forms, everything, and you're making the very first decision there in the field, and you've got a little bit of a chance to make some more later in the darkroom. But I suppose if I was trying to explain to someone, if I was out in the field, it'd be quite hard to do, and in a way that it might instinctively understand a landscape format, as we are naturally set up, aren't we? Our eyes, as I listened to your last podcast, are set at around f8, and in a landscape format. And, yes. But I don't go around in landscape format, as I said earlier. I have never stopped going around without a square in my head. Yeah.
So you're just finally now starting to print your own film. So previously you were shooting in film, but what did you do? You scanned?
I was scanning. Yes, yeah. I was scanning. And I will still scan these ones from tomorrow, probably tomorrow morning. And it will take, probably a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks at an hour a piece. And then that's available to go on the website in reduced form, but also in the future, say I want to print digitally, I do have an Epson 3880 printer with pixography inks, solely dedicated to black and white, John Cohn's pixography inks. And so I still have that option, but I'm not expecting to. But that's how I did it before, on this little journey to discover which way I want. But I really changed when working within Boston Gallery, just absorbing the beautiful silver gelatin work, month after month. I thought, well, possibly for my style of photography, that would be the way to go if I can find a way of getting the experience in the darkroom at short notice. And so I threw myself into it, and I'm quite happy already, but I've got a long way to go.
So you mentioned how you see in Square, you're thinking of compositions as you're driving to a location, and also you talked about using filters and visualizing there. As you've been working in your own darkroom, are you also thinking more about the post-processing that you're going to do than you did before? While you're shooting, I mean.
While I'm shooting, yes, I was thinking about this in Germany when I was standing up on German meadows and on hillsides. It says, because I'm now going to be in control in the darkroom, am I thinking in a different way about the composition or the length of time I want to photograph? And I think I was slightly, and it'll be interesting to see how this develops. So I was already... I wouldn't say it's pre-visualizing the whole thing before I've gone there. It's just when I've got a sense of the long exposure, and I'm already, while I'm waiting to close the leaf shutter, I'm thinking maybe I'll burn that in the darkroom once I see what I have. But then, of course, once you get the negatives, you get a slight surprise here and there. I do, for one location, I might do 3 shots. I mean, it's not quite bracketing. It's more likely to be different lengths of time and with a different filter. But or I might do 6, depending on how enthusiastic I am about the sky having more character. Or as I love clouds, I do like to use sky a lot. And yes, so it is a consideration now, and I'll be interested to see myself where it takes me. I should have asked Michael Kenner if it had affected him over the years. Probably he would say yes. So when he's out in the field, it does affect his eventual printing style. Yeah.
I can imagine that you're visualizing the entire process, and as you say, you'll get the negatives, maybe it's going to change. But and even, what did you say, 21 rolls of film? How many photos on each roll? 20?
12 times 21.
So you come back with 250 odd photos. You're not going to remember them all.
No.
Yet when you see them, there is something that's going to come back in your mind, especially if you've got multiple photos, as you say, with different filters or different times, then this is going to remind you of what you were thinking. Of course, you could also take notes while you're doing it.
Very true, Kirk. I don't take notes, but I seem to have a slight photographic memory when I see the frame again. And I mean the story, not necessarily the visual on the day and what settings I was using. But I can remember every person I met. It might surprise you how many people come up to you when you're using Hasselblad. And,
really?
And of course, it's a slower process, so you're there for longer and approachable. And even in the gallery, we learnt that what really helps photographs if you can remember a story that goes with them, because a photograph plus a story, if you have to write or speak about it, is doubly interesting than the photograph on its own. Of course, most photographs, if they're in a gallery, can stand on their own. But when you want to talk or sell the photograph, it really, really helps. And I'm always interested in other people's stories. You've interviewed Michael Kenner and many other photographers. You know the really interesting stories across, say, 46 years of photographing Mont Saint-Michel or that Casharo Lake tree that he made famous. It's the backstory behind it. And I'm more conscious of that now. I'm sort of absorbing those little stories, those feelings, and the people I meet at the same time I'm photographing. And it's actually made it an even richer experience when I'm out there. And I can think of, I was photographing a chapel down near Bodensee, Lake Constance, in a meadow. And a lady, quite shyly, came up to me. Turned out she used to photograph 6x6, quite a young lady. And she was just on her daily hike back to her village. And now we're good friends, or, contacting each other. And it's wonderful, that experience out of nothing. And so I love that aspect of it too. So that I can straight away link a negative to the person or that experience very, very strongly, actually. So even right back to the 80s, I can remember that very moment. So, yeah.
But you said people come up to you because you're using a Hasselblad. Is it that noticeable, or is it just that there are that many photographers around the world who have seen Hasselblads and are curious?
I think it's a different shape, isn't it? And to a digital camera generally. And some people have thought it's a video camera. I'm out filming because
fair point. Because you're using a tripod. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And it's a shape once it's got a longer lens on, and
it's got that crank on the side like the old film cameras.
And I've got a megaphone as well. It's just, I think it might be something, and I notice every generation actually, it's something about, because you're wandering around it and setting it up, and you're doing things around a Hasselblad in a way, looking over it, under it, beside it, and you're there longer. It just looks already as though there's some craftsmanship to it. That's what I've felt when I've seen, documentaries on photography. You look at people in the past, like Ansel Adams and all those great landscape photographers. The whole setting, if it's actually filmed what they're doing, the whole setting up of it is quite a palaver. And you obviously a craft to even get anywhere near making an exposure. And maybe with my little Hasselblad, people just recognize there's something going on. It's a bit different than a point and snap. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone with a Hasselblad. We used to get a lot of Chinese tourists here in Stratford, and I do see red dots on a lot of cameras.
Yeah.
But you don't see people setting up a Hasselblad on a tripod.
No,
That's
you
something
don't.
I haven't seen yet.
I must say I haven't bumped into anyone else, but it's certainly been recognised on the top of an Italian mountain last winter on Monte Baldo, quite a few thousand feet up with a 40-mile-an-hour wind like today, actually, and well below freezing. And a group of three were walking their dog on the very crest of the mountain, and I couldn't believe it. She recognized it as a photography student from down in the valley miles away, and we had a nice long conversation about it. And she was so pleased to see one again out of the blue. So it does happen, and but I haven't bumped into anyone with one out in the field, and actually I don't quite often, I don't really bump into other photographers. It might be it's just some locations I'm choosing or times of day. So only once or twice have I crossed over self-consciously, and then have to wait for them to do their work. There's a code, isn't there? So, but no, I maybe I will see Hasselblads in the future dotted all over the landscape. I don't know, as it becomes more fashionable, you might say. Yeah.
Okay, Angus Haywood, thank you very much for joining us. This is very enlightening. Links in the show notes to Angus's website. Do check out his photos. There's some wonderful stuff there. We'll link to your Instagram if people want to follow you on Instagram as well. Angus, thanks again, and I hope we'll meet up again soon.
Thank you, Kirk and Jeff. Lovely to chat to you about it.
Okay, it's time for our snapshots. What have you got this week, Jeff?
I've got an application for the Mac. It's called Avalanche, and it's by a company called, I'm not sure how to say this, Cyme, C-Y-M-E. And Avalanche is a tool to let you convert old libraries, like, say, Aperture libraries, because Aperture no longer works under the most recent version of Mac OS, to convert your libraries from something like Aperture or iPhoto into Lightroom, or now they have it for Luminar. And it's basically an automated version of stuff that I describe in my book, Take Control of Your Digital Photos. And it's using machine learning in some way to keep the edits that you've made. I haven't used it extensively yet. I've done a few sort of smaller tests, but it seems to do a really good job. So if, like me, you have some old Aperture libraries that just haven't been brought over yet, this is definitely something to check out. You can download a free version of it, and a license starts at $59 for Avalanche for Lightroom. They also have Avalanche for Luminar. There's Avalanche for Capture One, or for $119, it's you have Avalanche Unlimited, which lets you sort of do any of the above.
So if I understand correctly, you've got a photo in Aperture and you've made all these edits, and it's going to bring the photo into something else with the same edits? So in other words, you can continue editing it in, say, Lightroom?
Yes. To what extent, I'm not sure yet. It may just be creating like an edited version, but it seems to be having the smarts enough to say, oh, okay, this has been like the black and white conversion has been set to this. And I think, I'm going to say this out loud because then I'll be proved wrong. I think it's then making a similar edit. If nothing else, you're still retaining an edited version of what you had, and it's keeping all the metadata and all of that good stuff. Kirk, what do you have this week?
I have, how can I say this, an idea, a technique, a tip. I've been shooting a lot in high ISO lately. As you know, I like to shoot in black and white, and we've got Fujifilm cameras that has this wonderful film simulation called Acros, which is meant to mirror the Fuji's Acros black and white film. And I've realized how wonderful it is to shoot at high ISO to get grain in photos. And Acros is actually quite interesting about grain because it's not just an overlay of grain the way you'll get in some photo editing apps. The higher the ISO, the more grain you get. It's not just adding noise, it's increasing the grain. It's really quite clever the way they do this in Acros. So I've been shooting a lot of photos lately at a minimum of 1600 ISO, but often higher if it's not too bright out. I'm shooting with a pretty small aperture, and I'm finding that the beauty of grain that is just something that you get in film that you don't often get in digital. And I'm thinking of all the people who use sharpening and noise reduction on their photos in digital because they want them to look so bland. Whereas with grain, you've got a texture, you've got almost 3 dimensions, like we were talking about in silver gelatin prints, 2.5 dimensions, right? So in a future episode, we will have an opportunity to look at a bunch of photos that I've shot and that you've shot during the month of August, and you'll see that all of them have been using a minimum ISO of 1600. If you're the kind of person who wants everything to be pin sharp, try for a week or 2 using high ISO. Get the natural noise in there, because cameras these days, even if it's not a Fujifilm camera, they're a lot better with noise at high ISO than 5 or 10 years ago. There's something to appreciate about that rough texture that you can get from high ISO.
One thing that I'm going to be looking forward to is seeing the difference between noise and grain, because I think a lot of people think of them as the same thing, and they're really not. And if you have a lot of noise, it's a completely different visual appeal, even if in the outset you just say, oh, well, that's noisy or it's speckly or something. So I'm looking forward to this.
If you zoom in on these photos, you can see that it's grain and not noise. And obviously, it's getting noisy when you're getting up like 6400 ISO. But when you're in that sweet spot between, say, 1600 and 6400, it's a really film-like grain. Anyway, you'll see really soon.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast app.